Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joe Emilio show. Tonight, I have a very special guest on the show. He's been on the show before, but we've got an update with regards to, we'll find out if it's really regarding independence, but he's very excited about the news. But before I get into that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you are new to this channel, if you haven't seen this channel before, please give this video a like, share it, join the Telegram channel. It's a channel, not a group, so don't worry. You're only going to be notified about uploads and live streams on this channel. And of course, if you're new, please consider giving a subscribe. So with all that being said, I really want to get into this, and my guest tonight is Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. He's a good friend of mine as well, and he sent me a message about the DA. But before we get into that, I'm going to bring him right on. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. How are you, Phil?
Yes, good. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, nice to be with you again.
Cool. So let's chat a bit about what happened. So you sent me this this link to the DA. I'm actually going to put it on the screen so people can see it. And then I'm noticing my mic isn't plugged in. Hold on 1 second, guys. And then let me just get this sorted. You're so professional on the show all the time. There we go. Boom. All right, there we go. Sound should be better now. All right. So we got an announcement from the lovely DA. The DA is finalizing a private member's bill to amend the Referendums Act to give effect to the constitutional powers of premiers to call a provincial referendum. You're very excited about this. Tell us why.
Well, I think, look, this is just an important step. So I'm excited because probably as much as anything, that it's something tangible happening. So one of the sort of perverse things in our life as an advocacy group or a political lobby group is often the stuff that we do in the public domain is the stuff that catches the eye. And if we're doing something tangible, then everybody gets very excited. If we start to go quiet for a period of time, then funnily enough, we sort of tend to have our own sort of followers saying, look, what's going on, and get on with it, and so on. So it's really nice when and often that we work tirelessly. We can promise people who are watching that that if you're not hearing from us, that's when the real good stuff is going on, because then we're a lobby group, and without sort of saying too much, things like this are things we work very hard to happen. So this is a significant development, and it's something that's tangible that we can deliver, and not we can deliver, but the DA in this case have delivered, and people can see this. If we think of Cape Independence as a 110-meter hurdle race, then perhaps this is the first hurdle, but nevertheless, here we are over the first hurdle, and a lot of people have never really believed that we'll get over these hurdles. And particularly as an organisation, we've been, as you know from having been on the show, we're very focused on the DA, very focused on lobbying and trying to influence the positions of the DA. And an awful lot of people just said, look, it's just never going to happen. Actually, people inside the DA, people outside the DA. And I think this is tangible proof that actually the DA are human. They're a political party. They're malleable, and I think we have to see this as quite a significant step towards where we want to go. And this is the first step and not the last. And there are things I'm going to be able to say on this show, and there are going to be things that I'm not going to be able to say on this show. But this isn't the end of referendums. This is the start of a journey. This is just the opening salvo. But there's a lot more to come. So I think sorry, go on.
Sorry, I just want to ask you a quick question as well, because for those who may not have read the article, by the way, the article is linked in the description below if you want to go check it out, as well as Cape Independence Advocacy Group with their website. So please go check them out. But for those who maybe haven't read this yet, what does it mean? In layman's terms, what does this article actually mean?
Okay, so let's do both. So let's take, first of all, what does it actually mean in its literal sense? It literally means that the national constitution in clause 1272F, the powers of premiers, authorizes the premiers of a province to call a referendum in line with national legislation. And how it works with the constitutional legislation is the constitution provides the right, and then the legislation determines how that right is exercised. So in this particular clause 127, it says the premier has a right to call a referendum in line with national legislation, and the legislation is the Referendums Act. But the national constitution was finalized in 1996. The Referendums Act was last amended in 1992. So when premiers were given this right in 1996, the legislation that was last adapted in 1992 has never been adjusted. So that the national legislation only gives power to the president. So you've got a conflict between the constitution, which authorizes the premier, and the law, which doesn't. But of course, the constitution rules supreme. So that's the beauty here is now. So the law is unconstitutional. And actually, in the Western Cape is the only province that has its own constitution. All of the provinces can have constitutions, but the only one that has is the Western Cape. KZN wrote a constitution, but it wasn't ratified. There were faults with it at the Constitutional Court, and it was sent back, and they've never finalised it. So, and in the Western Cape Constitution, in clause 37.2.f, the exact same powers are existed. So therefore, we have these powers. So in its most literal sense, they're just correcting the legislation. So that is a fairly simple matter. Effectively, it shouldn't be controversial if you're just looking at it at face value. The really interesting question comes along that says, well, hang on a second, this legislation has been defective since 1996. And here we are in 2021. So why is it that all of a sudden, 25 years later, the DA suddenly decides to wake up and say, hey, let's fix this piece of legislation that has been defective for 25 years and nobody's worried about? And that's where, obviously, so now we get beyond the literal and to a certain degree into the speculative and to a certain degree not into the speculative, because obviously there are conversations that have been had. That's where the interesting part comes is, well, okay, why on earth does the DA suddenly want to change this legislation?
Okay. So basically, it just makes it easier for a province to call on a referendum rather than going through directly or having to ask the president or the ANC, rather. It just makes it easier for provinces to call for a referendum, in simple terms.
Yeah, it makes it possible. It wouldn't be possible otherwise. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's significant. Okay. So it makes it possible. All right. So, I think it's an important question to ask, like, why as the DA suddenly is like, oh, well, hey, there's a problem here. We need to look into this. We need to fix it. I think the DA would say that they just want to be a little bit more federalist, if I can put it that way. They want to make that more possible. I've had Helen Zilla on the show, and we discussed Cape independence, and she was very much against it. Natasha Mutsone also very much against it. I wouldn't say against it. They just don't see it as a possibility. Let's put it that way. And I actually wanted to speak to you about that very quickly and ask you, because you told me you watched that as well. And Helen Zilla said, it's going to lead to a civil war. Any thoughts or comments on that? Because that is a topic that's going around. Like when you talk about Cape independence, some people think, it's not going to happen unless there's a civil war. How do you feel about that?
Okay, well, look. So the war part, I wouldn't. Yeah, we can talk about war, but I mean, from my point of view, I think we're way too soon to start talking about that. And I think, not particularly ironically with Helen or Natasha, I don't think they're talking about war for illegitimate purposes. And I'll talk about how the DA think about these things afterwards, and that perhaps will give you more significance. But for a lot of people, and if you saw that video that Times Live produced at the end of last month, you see there was a lot of talk about war there. And you have to understand there are an awful lot of people who don't want Cape independence, need a big bad wolf. And war, of course, is a great big bad wolf, because often there are conflicts. And it's always a fascinating scenario. So people often point and say, well, hang on a second, South Sudan independence, there was a civil war. Bangladesh against Pakistan secession, there was a war. And for me, it's a chicken and egg scenario. Did independence cause the civil war, or actually did the lack of independence cause the civil war? In both of those situations, you had an oppressor. Let's use these terms loosely: an oppressor and the oppressed. And ultimately, the oppressors would not allow the oppressed to have voice, have self-determination as they're allowed. And actually, in both of those cases, the people who were denied self-determination took up arms. So is it their fault as the oppressed, for taking up arms, or does the fault actually lie with the oppressors? In our situation, what's very interesting is none of the independence groups, and you've spoken to a few yourself, and I understand you're having Cape Exit on again in a few weeks' time. We're all totally committed to peaceful means. So my question always, I think we've had this conversation before, when it comes to civil war, between who? There are no armed movements in the Cape Independence movement. We haven't got an army. Who are we going to have? We're going to push for Cape independence, and we're either going to have our rights respected, or we're going to have our rights denied to us. And if we have our rights denied to us, all of the groups are seeking to go the international political route in terms of getting support for what we want to do, rather than wars. So it's way too soon, to talk about that. We can't see any possibility of war, and I've said publicly, if it's a choice between independence and mass scale violence, I would rather not have independence. That's not what we're after here, and we don't see that scenario. But of course, in the whole, in total mix, it's there, and I think there are people who choose to bring that up because actually they want to scare us off. It's the new Swart Gevaar. There's going to be war, as opposed to having a discussion about, why do you want Cape independence? And is it just to have that, which is the conversation we should be having? Actually, people say, "Oh, you can't talk about it." Might be you're right, and it might be perfectly reasonable, but it'll only lead to wars. So actually, stop asking for the things that you're entitled to ask for. It doesn't seem a very sensible position to me.
No, absolutely.
So that's on war. When it comes to the DA, there was an interesting article, and that interview with Helen was there, and I wrote it. And actually, I was going to refer to an article to you now, and actually, I've directly quoted Helen on your show. So I don't know if you saw, but there was an article. I've just got it here. I'm just going to find it. That we had published in News 24 a couple of weeks ago, called "Western Cape Autonomy is now the dominant provincial political philosophy." And there we talked about how all of these different groups suddenly were now pushing provincial autonomy in different degrees, of which the DA is absolutely one of them. We might be pushing slightly different strands of provincial autonomy. And this is what Helen said on your show. This is her exact words. "One thing we support them on very fully," and she was talking about the independence movement, "is the right to hold a referendum. And currently the Premier does have the power the theoretical power to call a referendum, but only in terms of national legislation, which does not exist. And so we're all in favour of having that national legislation tabled so that the referenda can be held in provinces." So there it was on your show, she was very clear. They intend to call referendums. They're not just fixing the Referendum Act. They intend to call referendums once they've fixed the act. So that's the kind of background here. And in that article, if people haven't read it, they probably should read it, because there we talk about how the DA are really now pushing for greater provincial autonomy. AfriForum have opened a branch in the Western Cape because they are now for growing autonomy. The Freedom Front have come out in favour of independence outright. You've got Cape Party. Yes. We're always in favour of it. So we've got this political movement that actually between all of the groups is the dominant political power. So actually the dominant political powers of the Western Cape now want greater autonomy. And you have to start to think of these things. I always think that political opinion, and certainly the sort of political zeitgeist, for want of a sort of better word, it is a super tanker and not a jet ski. It doesn't turn on a pivot. People often say, what's happening? Why isn't we going to get on with it? Or we'd love to get on with it, but it takes time to do these things. And I think for people, if you go back and look at our interviews a year ago, nobody would believe that the DA were willing to move. And here we are a year later, and they're not independents, but I mean, look where they were a year ago, and look where they are now, and we're in vastly different spaces. And this is a very similar act. And if people want to understand how that is changing, Times Live, that video that we talked about that was released, it was a very good video. It was 8 minutes long. They interviewed Alan Windey, they interviewed us, they interviewed Cape Exit, they interviewed Pierre de Force, they interviewed the Cape Coloured Congress, they interviewed a whole load of people in there. Now, what's absolutely fascinating is in your show, Helen is there saying, we support referendums. Then 2 weeks later, Alan Windey's in a video saying, referendums. Why on earth do we need referendums? That actually we should be, we should sort this out at the polls. And then 10 days after Alan Windey's saying, we don't really support referendum, his own party has announced it's going to fix the Referendums Act. So you have to start to look at this and say, well, hang on a second, there are shenanigans going on in the DA, and everybody's not singing off the same hymn sheet, but we're moving towards referendums. And Alan Windey, the person who's supposed to call the referendum, clearly isn't quite on the same page as the rest of his party, but he's clearly going to get there. And actually, I also heard Alan moaning that he was being begrudgingly that he didn't like being blackmailed into independence and referendums, which is quite a fascinating thing for a guy who's the premier of the province and the majority of his own supporters want Cape independence. So, but I mean, that's what political pressure is all about. You've got the premier who doesn't want Alan Windey. Nobody in the DA seems to want independence less than Alan Windey. He's vehemently opposed to this. But actually, it's not about Alan Windey. The ship is moving. That super tanker of political opinion is turning in the Western Cape, and it's turning heavily in the direction of independence, if not its independence outright. So that's that gives a bit of a snapshot. And I'm sorry, I've talked for long now. And if you want to jump in, please do. Okay. Yeah. But you I said I would talk about how the sort of DA perceive these things, and I think so. People often understand, but they can't quite work it out because hang on a second, you've got Helen Ziller and Natasha saying no, we don't support Cape independence, and then they're fixing the referendum legislation, and then that, and actually there's kind of these sort of mixed messages. And what you have to think of is the DA is an organisation that is and I'm not a legal scholar, but they tell me the DA are legal positivists, which means the DA's frame of reference is what is written in the law. So if the Constitution says that you must dress in 3 yellow armbands and wear a blue cap, then the DA wants to dress in 3 yellow armbands and wear a blue cap, and that's their frame of reference. And the alternative to positive law is what's called natural law, which is actually where people say, well, look, it doesn't really matter what's written on a piece of paper. The law is just a piece of paper that reflects what people think. So let's worry about what people think and what people want, and the law will follow on. So the DA on independence and on these matters in general, not just independence, but on the police and all the things they say they want, are in a box of their own making. So they want it. We know they want provincial autonomy. It's in their manifesto. Alan Windey wants it. They've come out and they said Musi Maimani wanted it. Even in his era, they wanted provincial autonomy. But they say they want control of the police, and they say they want control of the railways, and they say they want to sort out EWC, and they say they want to have all of these things. But their frame of reference is, but hang on a second. In the Constitution, it says, in this piece of paper, it says, so they're in this box, and the DA is a political party that struggles to think outside of that box. They actually don't realize in many cases that they're making the box. They're trapping themselves in that box because the Western Cape people, their own voters, want them to go far further than, and I think that, I made a note over, that if I have to sum up, the DA is how do we do it almost comes before what do we want. Where actually other people and people like ourselves is we start off with, well, what do we want, and then later then, well, how are we going to do that? And that comes down to what this discussion about creating the political reality on the ground. In other words, we just the people of the Western Cape have to get out, decide what they want, stand up for what they want, and put pressure on the political parties to make it happen. And that's what we're seeing happening now. And we're seeing it not just through the independence movement. We've seen now that this movement has really blossomed. And it's caused great pressure onto the DA. It's people are saying, actually, there are a lot of people in the independence movement who strongly disagree with the DA. A lot of the hardliners are anti-DA. We certainly aren't as an organisation, and the majority of independence supporters aren't. But there are people that are anti-DA. So, and it's interesting to see on our social media, this is just an election ploy by the DA. They're only doing this because it's an election year. Absolutely, they're only doing this because it's an election year. What do they think political parties do? When do they think that the independence movement? When do they think that lobby groups like ourselves have the most leverage? We absolutely have gone out of our way to make Cape independence an election issue, and the DA and the independence movement fundamentally understand each other. That actually, 2/3 of independent supporters vote DA, and 53% of DA voters in the Western Cape want Cape independence. It's the same group of people. And that's manna from heaven for a political lobby group like ourselves who understand it's the same people. The DA cannot afford for independent supporters to have to choose between independence and the DA. And therefore, the DA has to find positions that allows them. And that's what starts to drag the narrative. And so you've got the independence group on one hand, and the other big issue that people are starting to realize, and the DA is starting to realize, is particularly we're starting to see a rise in coloured nationalism. We've seen it with the Cape Coloured Congress taking 20% of the vote in Delft. We've seen the Patriotic Alliance absolutely wiping the DA out in a province in a by-election in Gauteng, another by-election in Knysna, and this is so now obviously there's pressure on them from that side too, and that pressure is significant because the DA is frustrated. They understand the issues that are particularly faced by coloured people around affirmative action and so on. But they can't necessarily address them because in their little box of thinking, it's like, well, look, we know you've got a problem. We know affirmative action is really unfair. We know the Constitutional Court has addressed this issue and said it's unfair, but we've got the Constitution and we'd like to help you, but we can't. But I mean, for how long do coloured people, after 3 straight terms of DA governance, say, well, listen, okay, we'll put up with being racially discriminated against on a massive scale because we understand that you'd like to help us, but you just can't. There comes a point in time where people say, well, look, you know what? If you can't help us, somebody else will. And that is the change of that. That's what we're seeing now. The DA now is in its 3rd term as the provincial government of the Western Cape. It doesn't matter how much it would like to fix stuff, but can't because the ANC won't let it. We don't want a government who would like to fix stuff. We want a government who will fix stuff. And what we've got to know, and this is from me as someone who is a traditional DA voter, what we want to know is, and that's what this is all about, is when are you going to stand up and do something? We actually want you to fix these issues, not talk about it, not tell us all the reasons why you can't do it. We want you to fix it. And what we're seeing now is the emergence of a DA that's now got its back against the wall and suddenly realizing that the reasons why they can't do stuff is not going to cut the mustard anymore. They're now drinking in the last chance saloon, and they have to find a way of moving forward. And this is the first hurdle that addresses that. And we've now got this alignment between the DA, the Freedom Front, the Cape Party, to some extent the Cape Coloured Congress, ourselves, Cape Exit, AfriForum, and that says, look, you know what, we might disagree on exactly where the lines fall, but we all now absolutely agree that we can't put up with this ANC government 1 second longer, and we have to take control of these issues in the Western Cape, and we have to be much more brave and brash in doing so, and making excuses isn't going to cut the mustard.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, this is, what I also told Natasha when I was interviewing her is like, you say all the right things and you say you're doing this, and you're going the legal route, and you've done the whatever commission of this, commission of that. But I mean, that's all good and well, but we want more. You keep on saying, oh, we're gonna, and this is how we're gonna, and this is what we're gonna. And it's like, no, actions speak louder than words, especially now. Actions speak louder than words. And I think like you said, this is a very welcoming decision, or I don't know exactly how to put this, but like what they've done now with this private members bill is a step in the right direction. Question though about this thing, and before I give you that question, let me also say to the people watching, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I see your questions, but I'm going to give the last 15 minutes of this show for questions. So just please table them for now. We're gonna, as Phil and I talk, you'll probably be more questions. Keep them, and then in the final 15 minutes, you can ask Phil all your questions. So thank you so much for engaging. Like and share the video, please. And also, if you want to support the channel, give a super chat. Won't hurt anyone. Cool. So about what I wanted to ask you here. So they're tabling this now, right? How long do you think it's going to be before the law is amended?
Well, okay. The honest answer is we don't know, because the great unknown, and we ran a Twitter poll, we put it on about an hour ago, so it'll be interesting to see how people have responded. Is what we don't know is how the ANC are going to respond, and that is that's the great unknown here. There are three options effectively. The ANC can just decide to let this bill pass with the minimum fuss and to sort of move on into the sunset. That's option one. And actually, the last time I checked, very few people thought that was going to happen. But I'm undecided. I think there's a real possibility that the ANC will do that, and I'll explain why in a moment. The second option is that they dig their heels in and they force the DA to go to the Constitutional Court. And the third option is that they try and change the Constitution to remove the right out of the Constitution. So I think they're the three options that are going to happen here. Interestingly enough, you know how much Cape independence has become a part of the sort of political discussion of the day. To the best of my knowledge, the ANC have never said or written one single word about Cape independence. Nothing. We know they've discussed it at the ANC. Somebody else may find a quote. I don't think they've ever mentioned it at all once. They've spoken. They've probably been made 100 statements on Palestinian self-determination, but they haven't made a single one on Western Cape self-determination. This is a topic that they've avoided at all costs. So therefore, how do we know what they're going to do? Because they've avoided and avoided and avoided this, and because they want to avoid this fight, my suspicion is, or there's a real chance, let's say, that they'll just let this legislation pass, because effectively, let's assume let's look at the other options. Change the Constitution is not an overnight process. It's a massive process, massive thing. So what's going to happen is all over the news is going to be the ANC changing the Constitution to deprive people of the Western Cape of their hitherto constitutional rights. Given that people are already riled up for Cape independence, you feel that that's just going to invite, a hailstorm. So I think that's would be a danger. Then, in the same process, the Constitutional Court. This isn't a question of us having to agree whether this can happen. This right already exists. So therefore, the ANC can only deny it. They can vote in Parliament to deny the Constitution. So they can go on record in saying, look, you know what? We know people of the Western Cape have got this right, but we're going to deny it to them and vote against our own Constitution to deny them their constitutional rights, because we just want to be belligerent, and force the DA to go to the Constitutional Court, where they are absolutely guaranteed to lose. It's in the Constitution. A 5-year-old could make that proclamation. There it stands in the Constitution. What the legislation doesn't allow for it. So all that would do would drag the heels and draw out the process for a couple of years. And the same thing, it comes back to the change in the Constitution. And actually, which would I prefer? Would I prefer the DA to have to be forced to go to the Constitutional Court to make this happen, or for the ANC to quietly accede? I'd much rather go to the Constitutional Court. I can't think of anything better to get the people of the Western Cape utterly riled up than the spectacle of the ANC falling over themselves to deny them their constitutional rights. Which leaves me to come back to the first option of just quietly saying, okay, rubber stamping the bill and let it pass on, and say, well, look, you know what? we'll lose the battle, but we'll win the war. They're going to have this constitutional right to call a referendum, but we're under no obligation to respect the outcome of any referendums, and therefore we'll live to fight another day. And we haven't talked about Cape independence for 2 years, and let's not start talking about it now. Let's rather let them have this bill, let them have this right, and once they call a referendum, then we'll deal with that when it comes along, and we'll deal with that in Parliament. So they're the two outcomes I think the most. That perhaps they are stupid enough to go to the Constitutional Court. That's one option, but there's a very good likelihood that they'll just let this pass. And the DA believe that they'll just let this pass. So the DA are expecting this bill to be passed within the next 6 months.
Okay, 6 months. Well, hopefully that's the case. Yeah, but you make very, very valid and good points. I didn't even think of that. I would also, you know what, I'm in agreement with you. I would love to see it go to the Constitutional Court, because the mainstream media, everybody's going to jump on this topic, and it's going to backfire. I think in their faces if they make a big fuss and don't allow it. And I think they will just maybe quietly stamp it and live, like you said, lose the battle but try and win the war. And yeah, but just very quickly as well, I have a question about referendums. So referendum doesn't necessarily mean a Cape independence referendum. I mean, you can call a referendum for anything, really, right?
Sure. No, look, I mean, and actually, politics is a dirty game. It's a fun game from my point of view. I'm a rank amateur. We're rank amateurs of the CIAG. We're not career politicians. The people who run the CIAG have all got day jobs. We come from all walks of life, and we're having to learn. What we are is living proof of the power that ordinary citizens have if they choose to stand up and claim that power. So in terms of the announcement, there's some real fascinating things if you want to dig into it. If you go and read the DA's announcement now, it actually makes no mention of the Western Cape Constitution at all. It doesn't. Which is fascinating, because obviously it's the only province that the DA can possibly call a referendum in is the Western Cape. That haven't got any other premiers to call a referendum in. So now they're trying to paint this referendum act. They're obviously trying to not get tarred with the independence brush, because obviously they're not there yet. They're not at independence, as you say, and this isn't a move that they've chosen after 25 years to suddenly make. This is a move they've been dragged to by us, the people of the Western Cape. We've dragged them there. This is people power at its best. For the people watching, you guys have done this. That's the amazing thing. This isn't the DA, this is us. And you can give yourselves a big round of applause and think, you know what, if we can make them do this, imagine what else we can make them do. So you see this announcement by the DA, which makes no mention of the Western Cape, makes no mention of the Western Cape Constitution, despite the fact that it's in the Western Cape Constitution, and makes it out as if this is somehow just for the good of everybody around the country, and aren't we the good guys? Well, of course, that's a bollocks. This is all about the Western Cape. The only place they can possibly call a referendum is the Western Cape, and actually in the scheme of good old fun politics, the independence groups came together. We made a joint statement to the media yesterday. And it was ourselves, it was Cape Exit, it was the Cape Party, and it was the Freedom Front, and we made a joint statement between us. And there, of course, we corrected the DA's error and added back in the Western Cape Constitution and the reference to the clause in the Western Cape Constitution. And, whilst the DA would like to separate their Referendum Act and Cape independence, of course, we want to make sure that everybody puts those two back together. This isn't. They're not about Cape independence, but this whole thing is about greater autonomy for the Western Cape. And let's not kid ourselves about that it's anything else. Actually, if the Premier of KZN decides to call it for Zulu nationalism, or from the Premier of Limpopo decides to call it for vendor independence, both of which you have got movements, then fantastic, because we're all for decentralization. And we don't want other groups to be denied the rights that we want. We want this for everybody. But let's not kid ourselves. This is about the Western Cape and autonomy for the Western Cape and nothing else.
Yes. Well, what I gathered from the article, I think they tried to word it in a way where it makes it sound like maybe they're going to be fighting for that federal war. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I got from reading that. But once again, for those of you who've recently tuned in, the link to the article is in the description if you want to go read it yourself. It's very short, very quick. It's like a 60-second read. And yeah, it just basically says that they are busy trying to get the premiers to call for referendums. So yeah, please go check it out. That's exactly what we are talking about right now with Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. My name is Joe Emilio. Welcome to the Joe Emilio Show. Please give a like and share this video. Join the Telegram channel. Links in the description below, and give a super chat. Help support the channel. All right. So having said that, Phil, is there anything you want to say about this, about like anything that I haven't covered with you yet that you feel is important to mention about this article?
I don't think so. Look, I think, ironically, this is gloriously simple. I think we've covered it. I think, and actually, if people have got questions, let's have the questions. I mean, this is just one of those really good news stories. The people of the Western Cape decided that they had enough of ANC government and they had enough of the system, which really didn't suit us. And at that point in time, other than the Cape Party, which was a tiny fringe party, nobody was advocating for Cape independence. And the people of the Western Cape stood up and they created Cape Exit, and they created the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. And the Cape Party started to grow. And into that space, then the Freedom Front felt that they could come into that space now as a credible party, and they came in. Then AfriForum felt that they come into that space. And then the DA have now been drawn into that space. So this is just such a good news story of, listen, you know what, we don't have to put up with this shocking government, and we've now I don't want to be unkind to the DA, because we're absolutely delighted they've done this. We must understand that the majority of DA voters want independence. A huge number of people within the DA are on our side. We've always had Brexit as the model. And they look at Brexit. The Brexit Party never won a seat in the UK government, never won a single seat. Nigel Farage's UKIP, I think, won one seat. Brexit was delivered by the people of the UK influencing the Conservative Party and forcing it to do what they wanted it to do, knowing that a vast number of people within the Conservative Party also wanted it too. And that is exactly the story of Cape Independence. Ordinary people, coloured, black and white, thinking, you know what, we've had enough. We want to see changes. We basically know we're better off on our own. And actually, our political parties, our major political parties, aren't coming to the table. So we're going to drag them there. And knowing in the DA's case that an awful lot of people inside of the DA want this too. We're not dragging them to something that they actually, what we're doing with the DA is we're saying to them, the box is of your own making. The people of the Western Cape are showing the DA that the box is of their own making. They just tear the box up, and we can actually solve our problems without worrying too much about everybody else. Let's just get the people behind us first and move forward.
Fantastic. You hear John Steenhuisen often say, we want to listen to the people, and maybe the DA finally is. So it's going to be very exciting to see how the next, 6 months to a year unfold with this bill. And I think, your group as well as the other groups have done a fantastic job. So you said let's open the floor to questions. So those of you that are watching, please send in your questions. I did see one at the moment, but before I bring on that question, I do have one more question for you, Phil, before we open the floor. So those of you that are watching, start sending in your questions now. And after this question that I asked Phil, I'll go back and look at your questions. It's a very quick question, Phil. The march that you did in Stellenbosch was a lot of fun. I was there, documented it. It was like beautiful. We made history. And it's just because it's so much fun. I want to know, when are you doing another march, man?
Look, we do. Look, it was, people shouldn't underestimate how much hard work it was to do, but we definitely are. So we would At this point in time, our aim is to do another one, probably the month before the election in Cape Town. Okay. That would be so. But let's call that on the scratch pad. It definitely, that isn't an announcement. We haven't done it. At the end of the day, it costs a lot of money to organise a march, and more than that for us. We don't. Sometimes you see people saying, "Listen, you know what, you guys, you're just doing that for the money." If only they knew. At the end of the day, we all pay in to do Cape Independence, and not necessarily in cash, although some do too. But we all do in terms of time. So to organise a march, you're talking weeks of work, and us taking time off work, and so it's not an easy thing to do. But I really would like to do one in Cape Town before the election. I think it would make a huge statement, and I really hope that we can get some of the other political parties to march with us. And actually, if the DA are going to march for greater autonomy, then let's make it a march for greater autonomy, and let's have all flavours there. Let's really send a message to the ANC. Now, whether they're going to be up for that, not remains to be seen. But that I would actually, let's make it this, there is this dominant now bloc that all have had enough of the ANC. We want to take power into our own hands. We want to start making meaning things happen. And now is the time to stand together and have a real show of force coming from the Western Cape. And I think what an amazing way if actually the DA and the Freedom Front and the Cape Party and the Cape Coloured Congress and whichever other parties that feel the same way obliged, we perhaps the Patriotic Alliance, and we all march together through the Straits of Cape Town to say, look, you know what? Actually, enough of your nonsense. This is the people of the Western Cape standing together, and we're standing for a better future. And some of us think that's Cape independence, and some of that think is greater autonomy, and some of us think it's somewhere in between. But actually, it doesn't really matter. We're all standing together against your corruption, your incompetence, your racism. We're standing against you.
Yes, absolutely. And I gotta tell people, like, Phil, please, like, the moment whenever it is that you've confirmed it, please let me know. I'll have you on the show again. We'll punt it, because your first march was phenomenal and it was so much fun, and I can't wait for another one. And I'll also be there to document it. All right, so let's open the floor now for some questions. We got one from Three Freet, interesting name. How much revenue does Western Cape send up north?
Okay, right. So I'm going now from memory because I haven't got my cheat sheet in front of me. So forgive me if I get a decimal point somewhere slightly wrong. But the Western Cape, produces 13.9% of South Africa's GDP. We actually have 15.4% of South Africa's taxpayers living in the Western Cape. As we produce 13.9% GDP. We have 11.2% of the country's population. So therefore, we punch above our weight. And actually, in terms of the money that the government allocates back to provinces, we get 10.1% allocation. So actually, we're paying in 13.9% and we're getting 10.1% back. There are only two provinces in South Africa that are fiscally net positive, and that's Gauteng and the Western Cape. So there's two provinces that pay into the system, and there are 7 that draw down. And again, we talked about the Brexit analysis. There's a very similar analysis there. One of the issues around Brexit is there were 3 countries that paid into Brexit and 17 or 20 or whatever the number was that drew down. So we have that same scenario. And I think most people in the Western Cape, if our money was being put to good use, I don't think people would have any issues. But because no, it's not. We know it's just been stolen en masse. So therefore, we are just subsidising the grand scale theft and looting of South Africa with our tax money.
Yes, absolutely. I'm seeing someone important in the chats. Des Palm, thank you so much for tuning in. Des Palm, ladies and gentlemen, will be on my show. He's part of the Cape Exit, and he's going to be on my show not this coming week, the week after, on the Monday, I believe. But that show is announced. It's on my channel. Please go there, set a reminder. Very much looking forward to having him on the show to chat about Cape Exit and their over 800,000 members that they recently obtained. Very exciting.
Joe,
cool.
While we're doing that, then let's just say I doubt there's anybody watching that hasn't already. But if there's somebody watching who hasn't given a mandate to Cape Exit, please go to their site. Please give them a mandate. Let's get that 800,000 to 900,000. We do obviously. we do a lot of political lobbying, and I can say the most powerful tool in our armory is Cape Exit's mandates. That puts the fear of God into political parties, and you have to think that Cape Exit have got 825,000 mandates. The DA have got 1.1 million voters. It won't be too long before there's more Cape Exit mandates than there are DA voters, and you can imagine the political power of the. And I know Cape Exit plan to use those mandates in a different way, and we're all behind that. But we certainly use them for all their worth in our discussions behind the scenes too.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Des and I will talk about that as well in greater detail when he's on the show. Here we go. South is asking, what happened to the website that's supposed to show which candidates support the Cape Independence referendum?
Very good question. One that I can't answer. You're going to have to just read between the lines. The website was the website was prepared. It was ready, but now we're having the referendum legislation changed. So therefore, perhaps there isn't a need for that website anymore.
All right, well, there you go. I'm going back in time now to see some other questions that we may have missed. There's one here from JC McFarlane. October elections, will the DA lose interest in the referendum matter after elections? And what about current referendum legislation?
So look, of course, there's a risk. There is no question that we politics is a dirty business. Here we are, and answering that last question. I hope you can read between the lines. Let's put it this way: that the DA weren't very excited about that website. So, but they knew about it. So lobbying is a ongoing and constant process. And we, so therefore we're in a situation where the DA are particularly vulnerable at this point in time. Clearly, after the local elections, they're going to be a period where they're slightly less vulnerable. But I mean, actually, the 2024 elections are far more of an event for the DA. So I think clearly they could spin everybody along, sell us a line, get through these elections. But I mean, that would be foolhardy because actually everybody's just going to afterwards then come 2024 are going to be furious, and actually that's when the DA can actually lose in 2021 the DA can't lose the Western Cape. But in 2024 it can, and publicly that's a position that's been on the table. That's where Alan Windey feels blackmailed. And actually bit bizarre, really. He's on record 2 or 3 times as saying that if people want Cape independence, they need to vote for it. And then when people come out and say, well, look, you know what? Actually, if you aren't going to listen to us, we're going to make sure everybody brings you under 50% to force you to referendum. Well, you're blackmailing us now. But I mean, you can't really have it both ways. It's slightly bizarre. But again, I want to give DA credit because I'm probably feeling a bit unfair in some ways for. They are, what I can tell you is they are committed to this. They're committed to the legislation, and they're committed, as Helen said on your show, they're committed to calling referendums. So there isn't going to be any backing down, but obviously how much pressure they feel under with regard to Cape independence is going to ebb and flow, and that is something that we as people of the Western Cape, as independent supporters, as independent organisations, that there is the pressure is on us to make sure that we keep the pressure on the political parties to keep them pushed towards Cape independence, because if we let them off the hook, they'll be off the hook. So we have to keep the pressure on.
Absolutely. And then this is the following question I have here is maybe a tough question, but here we go. 3 Freets again asking Joe, Emilio, and Phil. Saying Joe, Emilio, Phil said that to conduct an independent survey on who supports Cape independence would cost upwards of 240,000 rand. Now I ask, wouldn't that money be better spent elsewhere, like the hiring of buses for future marches?
Sure. Look, money is always a difficult issue, and if anybody's listening and wants to make a donation, then please visit our website and do. So, look, and what you spend your money on is always a challenge. Last year, we managed to raise enough money for a poll, and we raised enough money for the march, and then we obviously had enough money to run our organization too. But it's always a challenge, and it's difficult. So this is something that's debated internally as the CIAG. So I can just tell you what how we feel about these things, and I don't say they're right or wrong, because there's no right or wrong answers. The poll was probably the most powerful tool for Cape independence that we've seen. So that if I had to say which basically which delivered the heavier blow for Cape independence, the poll or the march, then it would be the poll by a magnitude of about 10. It was the first poll. It was data. People could no longer dismiss the independence movement. There's been endless articles written about the poll. Whenever you talk about independence, everybody now references that poll, including political parties, including us, including the newspapers. So it just became an incredible thing, because all of a sudden it meant that Cape independence couldn't be dismissed. Now, there's a gamble with a poll, because you don't know what the answers are going to be. If we run another poll this year and all of a sudden Cape independence has stuck fast at 36%, which is definitely a possibility, because one of the biggest issues with Cape independence is the lack of awareness. A lot of people still don't know anything about Cape independence, and therefore you could spend 250,000 and have data that probably doesn't add too much to the debate, and that's a real risk. But you have to do that. We have to know as an advocacy group. So from my point of view, if I have to choose between a poll and a march, then I'll choose the poll. And we would like to repeat that poll. But I mean, we're planning to raise the money for both. We want we were successful in doing so last year, and I hope we'll be successful this year. And if anybody, even not personally, if you've got contacts, if you've got business associates, for funding is a huge issue for we're a not-for-profit organization. None of our staff none of our people are paid. The money goes to the cause, but money is a huge thing. And at some point, without being crass, if people want Cape independence, they're going to have to pay for it. It's 250,000 rand for a poll. That's what it costs to do a poll, a credible poll. You can do cheaper ones, but if you use an organization nobody's heard of, and you use methodology that isn't accepted, then everybody just dismisses it. So you have to do it proper. From funding, if anybody can help us with that, if you can connect us with people, funding is a big thing, and we would really, it's important. It may be the difference between winning and losing for Cape independence. It really is that significant with that, and I hope people take that in the spirit it's meant. It's not money for me or for anybody else in our organization. It's to make sure that the goals of Cape independence are furthered, and we really need Cape businesses to get behind this.
Yes. So ladies and gentlemen, please go check out the Cape Independence Advocacy Group website. It is linked in the description below, and please go help them out. Phil, I'm not getting any more questions. Seems like people are satisfied. There is a few comments saying the DA is not the answer. I think they got a little bit triggered with that one. But I don't think that's exactly what you meant. Look, I think I'm still, you know me. I love the idea of Cape independence. I come from a country that was built on independence, if I can put it that way. Americans got away from the British Empire, had civil wars, fought for their independence very hard. And I definitely support any nation, country, whatever that wants, or community as it be, that wants independence. I'm not against it. I don't think it's a racist thing. I don't think anything of it like that. I think, if there's a group of people that want to live their lives their way, I say let them do it. Let them do it. There's no reason why they can't. And I would love to see it. I would love to see it happen. I still have many discussions, as you know, with other people that are opposed to it, or may not think that it's going to happen. I love having those discussions with people, because the first thing that always pops up is I think it's like 2 or 3 things that always pop up. Money is going to cost too much for the Western Cape to do it. Borders, how are you going to control the borders? And you know, what's the name going to be? Now, we don't have to answer that now, but the reason why I'm bringing that up is because if you do want answers to that, anybody who's watching, please go check out Phil and ours previous interview on my channel, where we do answer those questions in depthly as well. Excellent. I love that interview that we did last time. So please go check that out if you want answers to that. Phenomenal discussion with Phil on that. Phil, is there anything you want to say in closing? Because we're almost out of time.
Cool. No, look, I look just interesting in the point that you touched upon. I know that people are, people are skeptical, and that's for me is one of the things that's most exciting about this argument. You know, you must see the independence movement as an iceberg, and you only see the tip. You know, you know, if we're in discussions with major political parties, and you know, we just can't go on Facebook and say, look, you know, I met X, Y, and Z on Tuesday, and this is what we talked about. You see, so you have to kind of take your cues from what you see. So this is really significant because it starts to give you this is the tip of the iceberg. So you can start to understand that if this is the tip of the iceberg, that there's a lot more to come in this thing. And in terms of independence, let's forget independence for a second. South Africa is going to break up. It's inevitable that it's going to break up, you know. And actually, you know, even for the people that don't believe in Cape independence, they just think it's going to break up in a different way, you know. Whether it's Frans Cronje who thinks it's going to be enclaves, or you know, whether somebody else thinks, hang on a second, the Zulus are going to break away, or whether it's other groups who say, well, look, actually, we're just going to have a complete collapse, a Venezuela type collapse, and the country is going to become so dysfunctional there isn't a government. And I think, Gwen and Gwenia from the DA talked about the parallel state. You know, everybody accepts that South Africa is going to break up. It's just a question of how does it break up. From our point of view, you know, we believe in Cape independence. I think Cape independence delivers the best possible opportunity for the people of the Western Cape, and ironically, particularly for the poor people of the Western Cape. You know, a breakup that's just a dysfunctional state that falls into disrepair is one where the rich are going to do just fine, thank you very much. It's the poor people that are really going to suffer. And you know, and for those people, I understand that people who've been marginalized and they look at independence and think, well, you know, look, we've been shat on by the last two regimes, and what says you'll be any different? And it's a fair question. It's for us to prove to you that that's not the case. But the reality is our solution, Cape independence, a viable state that's functional, that's a first world economy, is absolutely your best option. You know, and believe it or not, your interests are at our heart. And if anybody wants to question our sincerity, it's not really a political, particularly piece, but I wrote a piece called "A Leaving Poverty in the Cape of Good Hope." It's on our website if you want to find it in the blog, talking about actually my personal views on how we can grow a Western Cape that uplifts the people of the Western Cape and creates a better life for all. And you know, and I think if people ever doubt my sincerity in terms of why I'm doing this, that would be the most personal piece to me. This is how we see it happening. And I know from the comments a lot of people aren't fans of the DA. And at this point in time, who do I want people to vote for? I want people to go and vote for the Cape Party. I want people to go and vote for the Freedom Front Plus or any other party that's supporting Cape independence, because I want Cape independence to happen. But actually, I have a soft spot for the DA because they stand for two things that I passionately believe in. They stand for non-racialism, which I absolutely believe in, and they stand for a social market economy as opposed to a market economy. And I personally stand for a social market economy. At the end of the day, it can't just be left dog eat dog. We actually have to reduce people's dependency on the state, but we can't really think after South Africa's 100-year history of which we don't talk about, that somehow we're going to have 2 million people living in shacks, and we could just say, right, okay, the market will sort it out. We can get to a market economy, but actually it's going to take us a bit of time to undo those things, and that requires some degree of compassion and caring from us, and that's something I feel very strongly about. I'm not now speaking for the CIAG. I'm talking about myself because the CIAG is non-political, but personally, I want to see people uplifted.
Fantastic. Perfectly said. I just also want to add to that by telling you or showing you some comments of encouragement. Ryan Brandt says, please tell Phil they're doing a fantastic, in caps, fantastic job. Thanks.
Thanks, Ria.
Then John is asking, come to Paul also, please. God bless you, Independence Cape. And then, yeah. Then some people saying I'm not a fan of socialism. I don't think that's what Phil meant.
No, I'm not a fan of socialism either. No, we can agree. We all hate socialists.
All right. Well, that's an hour. So, Phil, I won't take any more of your time. But thank you so much once again for joining me on the show. This was a fun as always. It's always fun to have you on the show, and enlightening as well. Thank you so much for helping the viewers understand what this meant. It is a very big deal, and I hope that people will continue to share and tell people about Cape Independence, and hopefully we can grow it even more. So yeah, Phil, if you want, you can stay backstage, but if you have to go, I understand. But yeah, if there's anything final you want to say, here's your chance.
No, good. Just thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, Joe, giving us the opportunity and always being so supportive of the stuff that we do, and being willing to give us a chance to discuss these issues. Thank you to everybody, and just as always, believe in ourselves. We've just got to get people behind this. And do everything you can to get your friends, your relatives, just behind Cape Independence, and whichever blend of that is, it's fine. It doesn't matter if that's with Cape Exit or the Freedom Front or with Cape Party or with us or whoever else. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together. We're pulling the same way, and just get behind Cape Independence. We can do this, but we've got to do it ourselves. Nobody's going to deliver it for us. And this referendum thing is the proof of what we can achieve. We've achieved that really in the space of the last year as a group, the wider independence movement and its supporters. So if we can achieve that in a year, let's imagine what we can achieve in the next year.
Absolutely. All right, Phil, stay backstage. I'll join you in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. Once again, the website is in the description, as well as the DA announcement that they made. Go check it out, read it for yourself. It's a quick read. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Don't forget to please subscribe before you go. Got more content coming your way, and I've got Des Palm from Cape Exit going to be interviewing him on this channel, talking about the over 800,000 members that have signed up through him, or through Cape Exit rather. We're going to be talking about that, what the future of Cape Exit looks like, and far more other things that we're going to talk about. Their angle, what they're trying to do, and how they're contributing towards the Cape Independence. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with him. That's within 2 weeks, I think. So go check it out on my channel. Set a reminder. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you guys will share this far and wide. Look out for Real Moments. That's where I take clips of interviews like this, and I shorten them into 5 to 10 minute clips. Easier, quick for people to digest, and I will be doing that for this show as well. So keep an eye out on my channel for those real moments. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be back tomorrow evening. If you're interested, I'll be having Gabriel Kraus on the show. So I hope you'll tune in to that at 9 p.m. If I don't see you there, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.